Hello everyone! Today I'll be sharing my observations and subjective opinions about the early access and open beta of Diablo 4. And there will be many points to talk about, so without wasting any time, let's start. First, aesthetic and atmosphere of Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is a gorgeous game with a grim and brutal atmosphere. It not only does provide the dark world by just showing some gore, and boy does it show some gore, but by also telling macabre stories, which I'll be going into some detail and give some spoilers from the open beta period here. So if you don't want to hear about them, you can skip to another part of this video where I talk about other points. One prime example of these grim stories was from the main story arc, where a simple guard who takes bribe that you probably think you won't care about as the rest of the story unfolds, as he's seemingly just a simple piece of NPC on the main story, becomes one of the saddest redemption stories when, to prove his fate and to redeem his sins, he wears a literal armor that has spikes on the inside. And that guard dies helping you. It is not only on the main story arcs that you can come across well thought of stories either, as some side quests has overarching storylines that proceeds up to at least 3 or 4 sequential parts. One example from there I could also give is, a lady, an NPC, asks you to bring back the woodsman's axe for some reason. You clear out an area, and when you give the axe back to the lady, the side mission seemingly ends. But when you come back to the town afterwards, you learn that the lady went crazy and went on a murder rampage, because the axe you brought to her was cursed, and now you have to kill the demon that possessed her to save the townsfolk. This gothic world that you are trapped within, and only way to survive is going deeper into this mess, is a theme that you encounter throughout the game, at least in the first act, but it would not be wrong to presume the overall tone will be the same. My opinion is that if you were a fan of the original Diablo and Diablo 2, excluding Diablo 3 here as it wasn't a huge success in terms of being dark and gritty, you will be happy to see that the series took a turn here from Diablo 3's seemingly chill and cartoonish atmosphere, both story-wise and visually. Second point, it would be only reasonable to continue with the storytelling here. I gotta be honest, my expectations going into the beta was low on this aspect, but it is really well thought of and is supported by many different instances of good cutscene usage. So, there are 3 types of cutscenes within the game. First is your usual cinematic pre-rendered cutscenes that we are used to seeing from a Blizzard title. Second is in-game engine rendered cutscenes where you can see your own created character in the cutscene itself, which I found really immersive and a great addition overall. Thirdly, in-game in-the-moment scenes where the action happens right in front of your eyes. It is really obvious at the start of the game where after you arrive to the town, you are given a mission to clear a dungeon. After you clear that dungeon, townsfolk pay you with beer and food as they've got nothing else. And you get to see the whole thing happening, not in a usual cutscene, but in the game itself. Which kind of reminded me of scripted scenes in Larian Studios' titles, such as Divinity Original Sin. Specifically, I'm talking about the first one, which had some instances of this kind of storytelling. All these ways of communicating the story is really powerful and effective, and the story of Lilith and the mystery behind her actions are quite impactful. At least for the first act, which we had access to. Voice acting is phenomenal, and I especially love the voice actor's performance on Lorette. But even the side quest giving NPCs or just NPCs that you can interact once sounds great and creates a great immersion. Third point. Now, let's get into the actual game by talking about classes. So, on the first weekend, the early access beta, we only had access to barbarian, sorceress, and rogue. I have been able to play rogue on that weekend and my impressions were great. It felt fluid and almost dance-like rhythm of the way rogue played impressed me. On the second weekend, on the open beta, I had been able to play all classes and had the chance to form a better idea about how class systems work. I have some divergent opinions on this front, especially with the class balance, which we will be talking in a moment. For the moment, I want to talk about each class individually. First, rogue. As I mentioned, it's a fantastic mix between melee and ranged combat. It felt really fluid, and I would say it felt as a rogue class should feel like. I genuinely felt the need to dash away from some fights, especially early on, and I have felt the power of stealthily approaching unaware enemies only to crit attack them from behind. I like the possibility of different combinations, but I'll talk about that in skill trees later. For necromancer, it is really as good and powerful feeling as everyone makes it to be. Its class specialty is the Book of the Dead, in which you have three main, so to speak, pages. First is skeletal warriors, second is skeletal mages, and the last is golems. Each of these pages have three different options within them. For example, skeletal warriors have attackers, defenders, and reapers as options within them, and it is designed like pure DPS, tank, and area of effect minions. The interesting thing is, after you select one of these options from these pages, you also have three different options within each subtype. So skeletal attacker minions have three options you can pick from which the third option is always the option to sacrifice these minions to gain some other stat for yourself. So if you pick the third one, you cannot summon any minions of this type, but you gain some bonuses for your character. I really like the system and I feel like it will be providing some variety to the playstyles. My biggest concern about overall impressions of this class is that I see on YouTube, on internet, basically everywhere, only one build that is seemingly viable, which is simply not the case. I realize that meta might be a thing, but when you reach level 25 on full legendary builds, you simply do not need a single skill that is too overpowered that you won't have any diversity of skills. I feel like that's an exaggeration and just to create some strong opinions about the game. In my own opinion, if you have some idea about how to build your character, you can have plenty of different combinations of builds that provides the same effect. Anyhow, on barbarian, at first I thought it was truly underpowered. But when I realized its specialty, weapon expertise, which basically provides bonus stats the more you use certain types of weapons, I realized that it is just a matter of playing and grinding the character beyond level 25 to achieve great gains. In my opinion, the game is definitely not balanced at first, for all classes, which seems to be intentional, as I can see a huge potential for these seemingly underpowered classes to grow and potentially become the most powerful classes of the game. Especially after level 20, I started to feel the snowball effect, and I can only imagine Barbarian would get better and better the more we get to play it. On another note, I really loved how brutal the combat feels with Barbarian. Although it might seem extreme, it reminded me of the feeling of the first God of War, in which every axe hit felt like it had an impact on the game world. I had an, although not the same, but similar vibes from Barbarian in Diablo 4. My least played classes were sorceress and druid due to lack of time on my part, so I don't find commenting on these just by looking at others' footage right, but my previous comments about balance is definitely valid on these classes as well. Fourth point. A very similar point I want to talk about is gameplay and dungeons. Gameplay wise, I could easily say Diablo 4 is one of the best feeling games out there. I played it with both keyboard and mouse and an old Xbox 360 controller, and one thing I can say is both felt intuitive and impactful. I really liked how smooth the animations were, especially on Barbarian it truly shines, but Druid's transformations were, although lacking impact in my opinion, were really smooth, which I enjoyed. Dungeons, a crucial part of any action RPG game, is actually one of the weaker parts of the Diablo 4. So, it is not all rainbows and sunshine all over the place. Although I truly liked the design and how gritty each dungeon looked, they were especially bad on how much backtracking was needed on certain dungeons, and if you solely do dungeons, you can realize that some bosses are the exact same types, which kind of feels repetitive after a point. I also want to add a minor note here that maybe, just maybe, with all the different zones unlocked, it might feel a lot much more varied and diverse, but I still think dungeons are one of these aspects of this game that I wish could be improved more before the game launches. After saying all these, did I get bored while playing, or did I feel like I'm mindlessly grinding the same thing again and again in the beta period? Definitely not. It was a joy to play throughout these 2 weekends, and I'm definitely looking out to play more when the game fully launches on June. Fifth point. Optimization and performance wise, the game was quite smooth for me, which could be surprising to some, as I had no bugs throughout the 2 weekends, but I had a lot of rubber banding, especially when entering and leaving towns. It was quite obvious and distracting, but I had no bugs. I have a 6700 XT GPU and 5600 X CPU. I maxed out all the settings and I believe I had over 100 FPS all the time with no obvious drops other than some lag, which is completely on the server side of things. I had some stutters on the early access period, but on the second weekend it was completely gone, so I'm guessing some of the hotfixes already solved that out as well. Game ran quite well overall, but I have heard of some game breaking bugs online, which might be an issue if they are not solved by the time the game fully launches. So beware about that. 6th point. For the open world map and partial MMO aspects and world boss. The map is basically huge. I have played over 20 hours or something throughout 2 weekends, and I can easily say that there were some things left to do within the Fractured Peaks where the first act happens. I feel like this game will be a huge time sink if you're an explorer kind of gamer, which enjoys going into every nook and cranny because there seems to be a ton to do in the map. For the partial MMO aspects, I actually did enjoy having people come across while I was walking around the map or killing some mobs, and sometimes it just feels like they are yet another wanderer on the same journey with you, and it also happened once or twice to me that a random person saved me amidst a fight that went south. So I liked it. It might be immersion breaking for you, especially considering the whole Diablo lore. I respect that, but as someone relatively new to the Diablo games, I found it a welcome change. World Boss was quite fun. I had the chance to participate in it once, and it is like a festive event where you and a bunch of other random players wait out there for the world boss to show up, and that is a great excuse to connect with people and make some friends, which I felt like a great addition. The world boss itself was a great challenge. It is definitely not impossible to do with a team of 5 or 6 focusing on the task at hand, and is a fun event to participate in. 7th point. Itemization and skill tree. So, skill tree is really simplified and intuitive, which is really good news if you are new to the genre or if you are new to Diablo series. Then you are surely in for a treat, as the game also gives free respec up to level 10. So you can try out skills and see whether they are up to your liking, especially at the start. I will agree on some points I saw online that having respec unachievable after a certain point, as is stated by a developer, is not logical and seemingly unintuitive to the game's overall design. And I would love if the respect would stay at a reasonable cost. Definitely not free. I don't think having it as for completely free is good, simply because I don't want to feel like I can always change all the skills, but I want it to cost something but never unachievable to the point that I must create a new character. Itemization is a point that I actually liked. I like the ability to extract aspects from items and being able to imprint it onto a rare item, which turns them into a legendary item. I feel like this system makes the higher difficulties and higher level loots much more important and valuable. And I think itemization, which now seems like a simple thing that revolves around a single skill, could potentially be a wonderful thing with the unique and higher tier loots. I feel like we just don't know enough to form an opinion about that just yet, but right now it felt, at the very least, alright to me. Final summary. To summarize and finalize my review and impressions of Diablo 4, I can say that it definitely feels and plays like a AAA action RPG game, which is trying to renovate the genre by borrowing some systems from the MMO games that Blizzard is also very well known for. And in the meantime, it doesn't make things too complicated to a point where you have to dedicate work hours to the game, but also complex enough to have diverse builds and ideas around set and fixed classes, which I really enjoyed. As an ending point, I believe this game, at the very least, has the potential and every means to be the best ARPG ever. So these were my opinions and some of my observations. What do you people think? Let me know in the comments, tell me your thoughts and comments about Diablo 4. Have you played it in any of the beta weekends? Did you like it? If you liked this video and found it informative or to your liking in general, do like and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!